This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Okay. Hey, today is October the 12th. Um, it is 6 o'clock. Meeting of the Rome City Council will now come to order. Um, we do have a quorum. Looks like Ms. Ty's not here this evening. Okay. We'll start out with invocation, and Mrs. Beecraft has volunteered to do our invocation for us.
If we would all bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and this weather. We ask that you watch over us and help us to stay on the path you would like us to be on. Protect all of those here and all of those loved ones that are at home. And please give guidance to our city officials and just give them the proper knowledge and the wisdom to do what is right for the city. Protect all of our first responders and all the ones that are here. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Pledge allegiance. All right, for public comments, council is not permitted to take action on or discuss any comments made to the council at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. However, a council member or mayor may make a statement of fact regarding the item, make a statement concerning the policy regarding the item, and/or may propose that the item be placed on a future agenda or direct the city administrator to contact the individual to address. If you are attending the meeting via live streaming and you would like to make a public comment, you must email the city secretary at citysecretary@cityofrome.com prior to 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting and must identify each subject you plan to present to be recognized. If the writer of a public comment is unable to read their own comment, it should be given to a friend, family member, associate that is able to attend in person and read the statement in their stead. Public comments made in person require the speaker to submit the sign-up form to the city secretary prior to the meeting, and the form must identify each subject the speaker plans to present. A statement of no more than 3 minutes may be made. There will be no yielding of time to another person. Comments should be directed to the entire council, not individual members. Engaging in verbal attacks or comments intended to insult, abuse, malign, or slander any individuals shall be cause for termination of time privileges and removal from council chambers. All right, Ms. Odom, do we have any comments?
Yes, ma'am, we have one. It's Deborah Beecraft.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Deborah B. Kraft. I live at 360 West 2nd. Tonight I would like to address the tax rate for the year 2023-2024. Petition for election to reduce the tax rate. To the Rome City Council, this petition signed by the following registered voters in the taxing unit of the City of Rome is intended to require that an election be held in the City of Rome concerning the question of reducing the adopted tax rate for the current year 2023-2024. Provisions for this petition are set forth in the tax code 26.075 or 26.085. Thank you.
Do you have anything else, Ms.
No,
Sham?
That's the end of public comment.
Okay. Announcements from mayor and council members. City Hall is closed October 20th, 2023 from 12 o'clock to 4 for staff training development. City council meeting October 26th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Any other comments or announcements from council? Okay. And the consent agenda, we've got 3 items on there. Number one, minutes from the council meeting for September 28th. The city administrator asked me to table that as they were not ready. And then we've got approval of interlocal agreement with Wise County, and then approval of mutual aid agreement with Tarrant County. And I was hoping we could move those, if council has no objection, move those down to regular agenda. So we can get kind of a brief rundown on them before the council votes on those. Anybody have any objection? And we'll move that down to the regular agenda. Monthly staff reports and board minutes. Do you have any additional comments from any of our departments? Okay. All right, then let's go to regular agenda. Approval of interlocal agreement with Wise County. The fire chief's not here, but I bet our city administrator can probably address it.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is the traditional annual agreement that we sign with Wise County, as we are often dispatched to handle fire and other emergency-related events on the south side of the county. It's a fairly standard contract, the one that we receive each year from them. There haven't been any changes or updates other than the amount of money that they're allocating to our department has risen by about $20,000 or $25,000 this year. We also put that in your 23-24 budget, so that is already accounted for and shown in the financial numbers for the coming fiscal year.
And how much is that now? It used to be 53,000 for a long time.
Look and see on this if I can get the total number.
So are they actually going to, if it's 25,000, they actually going to 78,000?
No, it's somewhere in the 60s, I believe. Let me see what I can find. So the term began on October 1st of 2023 and runs through the next fiscal year. It says they will pay a sum of $5,441.17 per month. And we did factor that into the budget.
I'm sorry, 5,000 what? 41?
No, $5,441.17 per month. It's listed in the contract itself under consideration.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. Do you have a motion for that?
I move we approve the Wise County interlocal agreement.
I'll second.
Second is Schumake. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of mutual aid agreement with Tarrant County.
This is the same type of situation that we just addressed with Wise County, and hopefully to answer a question that may be asked, the amount of money for that is $8,500 for the year.
Okay. All right. Do we have copies of this in here?
And they're in the packet.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. All right. Motion on that one?
I move we approve the mutual aid agreement with Tarrant County.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Organizational update from the city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. This is something that we are bringing back at the first of each month to provide an update to council on pretty much most everything that's going on behind the scenes from when we met to the next one. So if you'd like to see other items or updates in this, let me know. But the first item on the list for tonight is the budget year and the audit work, and thus far what has been accomplished. So for 2024, as you know, the budget has been approved and the tax rate set, even though we have a petition that's been filed tonight to revert that to the voter approval rate, which was already factored into the budget, so it doesn't affect any of the budgeted numbers for the coming fiscal year. As council knows, we kept the tax rate the same as the last year. Shayna, I think my mic just went very low. We also hired 2 more firefighters, and we moved a full-time position in administration in the police department to full-time. So consultants, as you all know, are continuing to work to help us align our financial statements. We are getting very, very close to the final end of that. I have talked with all of them as recently as this week. They have taken the GL codes and updated all of those to match what's in the budget, what's in our bank recs, what's in our online system. They're also finishing out any of the journal entries, as I mentioned to you last meeting, to reflect the credit and debit of the accounts, and completing all the bank reconciliations to make sure everything is aligned. This will set us up very well for the future, and I'm very pleased to have this at our disposal so that we can get our budget put together in a more holistic manner, and we can take it to the next iteration or the next published piece of our budget. If you'll notice, the budget for this year was considerably more voluminous than the one prior, and it includes some of the information behind the numbers instead of just the numbers. So hopefully, as we continue to flesh out that work and develop it over the next couple of years, it will become a very meaningful document, not only for council, but also for our residents, because line item budgeting is fine, and we do use that, but it really doesn't tell why we're doing something or what the goals and objectives are at council and what we're trying to accomplish. So hopefully we are doing a better job at that, and this will continue to be reflected. The other thing the consultants have done is they've spent a tremendous amount of time training both myself, our accounting specialist, and our city secretary on all things as it relates to making sure that that internal system is working as it's supposed to. It's a fairly complex internal system. It's used by a number of cities across the state of Texas, so we do have a good product. It just takes a lot of finesse to be able to make it work properly. As soon as the prep work is done, we'll also begin preparing for the FY23 audit. As you know, we do have a deadline, as the mayor had mentioned before, of January the 31st to finish that, and it is my intention that we hit that deadline for this past fiscal year that we just ended. One of the other things that we've done is posted the budget to the website, and all the information that was needed by the county has been sent to them, which is legally required. In addition to the budget that you all saw, we also added the TNT paperwork to the back end, which is required. We also pulled the taxing information to the front, which is also required. So we've met all legal obligations as far as the budget is concerned and the posting therein. Any questions on that project? So moving on to communications, you all probably will see or may have heard, I think I sent you all copies. The first newsletter for October of 23 was resurrected and sent back out. We hope to do that every month. You know, we have limited staff, so if some emergency arises, it may be a few days late, but that is our goal, to get that published every month and on the website. We will also be trying to bring forward events that we know in our immediately surrounding communities so that we can keep our residents up to date. We did have someone in the October publication who was gracious enough to let me know about the Newark Cruise Nights, I think it's called, the big car show that they have. I think it's the 14th annual. So we did add that to the newsletter, and we republished so that people would have that information going forward. So that was very helpful. In addition, our Facebook has had several new subscribers to the account. We now have about 2,300 followers total on the city page, which is up considerably from a year ago. The police page has over 4,000 people, and the fire page has about 300 that are following it. And the fire page hasn't been particularly active in the past bit of time. It's a resource that you have to invest in order to do it properly, and the fire has been, they've been busy doing other things. So hopefully as the years go on and as we get folks onboarded full-time, that will give the chief some time to use that resource for himself. For the last 30 days, we've had a total of 12 new page likes. We've reached over 3,600 people with the posts that we've put out. We've engaged with approximately 1,650 people through that process, and interestingly enough, the one that had the most responses, I would say, was the recent picture that we put of the semi truck that had kind of slid sideways across 287. We had several thousand people interact with that page, and that seems to be, traffic is always a big concern. So whenever we see an event that's going to shut down traffic or move it through, especially during rush hour, we always try and get that on Facebook, regardless of when it's occurring. In addition to some of that information, the records management projects that we brought to you earlier this year have been very successful. One of the things that a resident brought to my attention, I believe it was Mrs. Wilson when I first started, was that there was a number of records in the bottom of the elevated water tank that needed to be tended to. And she was right. We went out and we did an audit of all of those records, and we inventoried everything that was in there with the help of Christy Adams from the municipal court. And she got all of that documented. She sent off a destruction list to the state, Secretary of State, and we disposed of all of the closed cases that were past their retention period. It was a big relief to her to get all of that out of there, and it is very, much more secure for the city and for us and for anyone that had previously had a citation in Rome. So we're very happy to have that finished. One of the next things that we'd like to do, in addition to the information and the items that are contained under the elevated tank, is we have a number of old equipment that has been stored there that we are going to bring forward on the 26th for council to consider either an auction or throwing it away. For instance, we have several LED lights that were donated to the city, or excuse me, they're not LED. We have to change them to LED, and it's a very expensive process to make that change. And they're really more industrial use, not city use. We're not ever, as far as I know, going to have a large parking lot, which is where they came from. So it's all of those are taking up a considerable amount of space in that section. So that will be at council's discretion, but that's one of the things that we'd like to bring forward as part of our work to get things a little more streamlined and efficient. That, and then we've got some old Christmas decorations that have been gnawed on by the animals that make their way in there, or have just, from years of use, they're no longer serviceable. So we'll be working on that. I think we have a date set for next week to start going through that. So that's great progress. In addition to some of that work, I have been meeting with folks to discuss potential development projects. The Prairie Point development, as you know, which abuts Crown Point on the northeast side of the town, has a new developer that has come forward. I will be working with some of our consultants and our attorney because they have asked for a municipal management district overlay and a potential TERS sharing. So we'll need to do a pro forma and present that to council in executive session before any of those decisions are made. I hope to bring that forward to you on the 26th of October so that we can discuss the pros and cons of that type of development project that may come to the city. As you may or may not know, Prairie Point is wholly contained within the city limits, so that would not require an annexation. But that project is about 1,050 single-family residential homes over a lifespan of about 8 years, probably, to finish build-out. The current developer that has come forward on this one also developed the trails of Elizabeth Creek, not the development that says Elizabeth Creek. The trails of is closer to Northwest High School, so if you drive by there, just take a look to the right and you can see some of the product that they were considering for Prairie Point. Let's see, I've also talked to a local builder developer who would like to develop 10 to 20 acres over off of Hickory Street. We will be talking about that tonight in executive session, as well as some of the numbers associated with that project. As you all may or may not have heard through BC Rhome, we had a meeting with the Planning and Zoning Committee where we have a potential developer who is thinking to bring an Ace Hardware to the city, which would be a wonderful addition for our residents and our community. It also have a nice outdoor garden area where people could shop for flowers and other things, and we are hopeful to be able to address their concerns, and it will be going through P&Z and ultimately to council for a final decision, hopefully over the next 30 days or so. As I mentioned, QT in the newsletter is expected to open much sooner than they were anticipating. I think the lack of rain has been beneficial to them moving that project forward. So they may open somewhere within the next 6 to 8 weeks, which is approximately 60 to 90 days earlier than expected, which is great news for us. Not only will the construction start to subside in that area and hopefully traffic, I know there's some concerns about it being considerably more traffic through there, but hopefully it will be less confusing than it has been with all the traffic rerouting, etc. So we are hopeful for that. One of the other things that I need to talk to council about this evening is I need a workshop date for the capital improvement plan discussion. I've had a couple of responses from folks, so I don't know if you all can check your calendar. Mr. Johnson, I don't know that you got that email, so I'll need to visit with you potentially after the meeting. I think I have heard from Mr. Loftus and Mrs. Ty, I think. And you? Both of you? Okay, excellent. I'll go back and check my email because I must have missed that somewhere in, but Mayor, I've not heard from you. So if you could check your email, please, and let me know if any of those dates work for you, that would be great. We were thinking 2 to 4 hours to discuss all those options. And I think after we look at the water project funding options, you may see why that's needed because it's a very complex and intricate conversation that would be best held if we had that as the sole topic on the agenda. It can spend a little bit more time with that. Change the slide, please. From one of the last times that we discussed this, I had put together for council some service areas that I felt like we needed to focus on. And so I'm bringing this back to the attention of the current council that infrastructure and asset management basics need to be dealt with by our community first and foremost. And we're doing some of that now when we're talking about the capital improvement plan. We're talking about the water and wastewater security so that we know where our water will come from and how our wastewater is to be processed. We've also talked about infrastructure as it relates to streets and the I&I runoff and some of the replacement that needs to be made in that area, as well as eventually we need to talk about facilities. We're not there yet. We have a few other things that need to be dealt with first, as we have discussed. And we have briefly talked about some of the technology needs in relation to the ARPA funds, and we will get into that again this evening. But those are really some of the main areas where we feel like the greatest focus should be for the city over the next several months. Finances and service delivery, as mentioned when I brought this forward in February, we have completed the first iteration of the updated budget with the additional details in it for our residents. The next step is to take that budget and refine it as we go through this fiscal year, as well as provide council with some financial forecasting. What do we look like in 5 years from the standpoint of growth that we know is coming? I don't like to put growth that is on the horizon but not closer to finishing because it gives a false sense of revenue and other things, but we need to fold in what we know is coming our direction and what we might see, because that will help us determine what type of services that we can fund and deliver and where the tax rate needs to be as we move forward. The community issue is also something. Development projects continue to come our direction. As I have mentioned, there's a comprehensive plan implementation. We discussed at the last meeting applying for an update to that comprehensive plan through GrantWorks. So once we get that back, that will be something else for us to look at. But again, those are future items as we move forward. What you see in front of you is a pyramid that I put together for council from these previous discussions, and it kind of talks about getting our basics in order. So you're looking at infrastructure and assets as mentioned, and then going up to finances and service delivery, and ultimately to building community. Now, some of these will overlap, but we do need to get a couple of things in line, water and wastewater being one of them, before we move to the broader look at some of the things community-wide we want to do. But this just gives a visual of what staff is doing behind the scenes and where we think the priorities are. Unless we're told differently by council, this is kind of the direction that we're headed. Are there any questions over this presentation this evening? So this would be on your agenda, the first meeting of every month, so that you have an overview of kind of what we've been doing and who we've been talking to and what may be coming your direction over the next 60 to 90 days, depending upon how fast development moves. Thank you.
Okay, number 2, public speaking verbiage on agenda. Some time ago, the council had voted this whole segment on the agenda for public comments to be read out loud at every single meeting. I think by now it's been read every single meeting, and it's time consuming, and I believe that it's repetitive, that people are already aware of what we require. I did talk to Carvin just briefly last week about it. He said it's not required, and it does take up time that we could be using on other things. So I would like to address council and see if we can take out this part as far as saying that before the public comments.
Is that something that's available on the website, posted there right now? I think at least if we have a way that we could
Yeah.
refer people to that verbiage.
I would also say, I think it's a little bit wordy, that it could be pared down,
Thank you.
but the alternative of not reading something, I agree that most people, if they're attending these meetings, they're well aware of what's expected from public comments and what's allowed and what's not allowed. But there are some people who come in here and have never spoken to a city council before. So having something, it's much nicer to say to them up front, say to everyone up front, 3 minutes, yada, 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 but maybe just not as wordy as it is here.
Just so council knows, when I went to the TML conference last week, this was actually a question that was asked at one of the sessions. And so I thought I would give you the feedback that I received from a couple of the cities and the things that they had done. Carvin and I did visit about this as well, because we knew this was going to be something that came up, and I wanted to make sure I could answer any questions that you all had. The whole statement in and of itself can be put on the sign-in sheet, according to Carvin. It can also be put on the wall, if we so choose to do that. He does recommend that there is some sort of notification to people instead of it not being anywhere. A couple of the cities that were at TML talked about this issue, and one city said they took the voluminous statement and put it up on the wall so that it is seen by everyone at every meeting. I think that might take up a considerable amount of wall space here, but we could certainly revamp the public participation form and we could put it on there. We could also put, you can pare down what's on the agenda now and then have the voluminous part back there on a plastic stand-up 8.5 by 11 that people could also read. Those are options to council one way or the other. I think there may also be some things in here that we're not necessarily doing. Like emailing the city secretary.
Is it currently listed on the public participation?
Not in this
public
form,
input
no.
form? I like the idea of revamping and putting it on the paper that's in people's hands.
Put it up on the wall, right there.
It can be costly to get signage.
Yeah, I'm good with the wall that condensed this, because it, like you said, it's very wordy.
I just need direction as to which way we want to go.
I move that we condense the verbiage pretty.
To how many paragraphs?
I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe 8 sentences, 8 lines, something very short. And then also include it on the public participation form, what do you call the form? Public entry.
8 lines is going to be
Participation.
more than, that's about half of what we got in here. 3, 6, 8, 10.
I think if you put it there and we could read a very brief statement, please refer to,
8 lines is the whole first segment.
that would be my motion, to put it on the public participation.
Anyone else have any suggestions or motion or?
I think what she had is perfect, so I'm a second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And number 3, American Rescue Act Plan Funds Review.
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of the items that we also discussed at the previous meeting. I have taken and updated the list on the front page of your agenda commentary to reflect the monies that we have spent thus far, as well as what's left, which is approximately $125,000. I also put in burgundy on the back page of your agenda commentary what we would recommend. There are potentially, under technology, this is one of the items that we discussed, is an approximate cost of $18,000 for 6 computers that need to be updated because they are well past their lifespan. Some of them are from 2012 coming forward to 2018. We would also recommend the technology upgrade for the cybersecurity enhancements, which is the $16,000 initial setup, and then the first year potentially of the maintenance of $17,000 would be included in that. One of the other items that we would need some direction on is whether or not council wants to upgrade the servers that we currently have on premise, or if we'd like to migrate to the cloud. This was something that we have discussed before as well, and I've listed those costs here. The records management software for the police department, the chief has asked that we hold on that just yet. There are some issues with the server that they have in the police department, and based on whether we upgrade servers or whether we go to the cloud and what vendor he finds, he's not ready to move forward in that area. And then the other thing we allocated was money for senior center upgrades to potentially get that operational again. So I listed those for you here, and based on which one council chooses, if they choose the ones that are in Burgundy, we may or may not have some funds left as it relates to cloud-based versus upgrading on the server. So I need some direction because we have to have this allocated or committed by the end of this year, and we've got 3 meetings left before January.
So do we have 291,000? Because it says an additional 125. Is that on top?
Oh,
of
I'm
that?
sorry. That's not correct. We have
Okay.
spent about 332,000 of the 457,000 based on some of the things that we have already approved. You approved the hose and nozzle replacement. I amended that. It was originally 24,000, but chief was able to get that at a lower cost of 10,000. And the extraction tools were approved at the last meeting for 32,000. So he's working on those, and that leaves the 125 that's left that you need to allocate. So these are some considerations that you may want to look at.
I think technology for sure.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is the 4 Burgundy are the ones that are priorities.
I would definitely recommend the 18,000 to upgrade the out-of-date equipment that you see under that first bullet. Then I would also recommend the cybersecurity enhancements. I had some discussions with folks at TML as well as online. Recently, I've read some articles about the importance of this. The cybersecurity enhancements would provide training for staff so that they know how to spot phishing and malware and potentially don't click on that. It also has some other things I think that would be very beneficial to us. You have heard about cities and others who have been the target of people that are attempting to gain control of things and shut them down for a fee to restore it. And I would not like to see that happen to us. So I would definitely recommend both of those. Then I would need a decision on the servers, whether council wants to update what's on the premises. What you may not recall is it wasn't that long ago that we extended the warranty on the current server because it is past its prime as well, and they were concerned about not being able to get that put back in or something. So Mr. Loftus can probably tell us better on that.
Yeah, typically it's a parts issue, and you have an entire aging machine there. And so, just like you have these 10-year-old desktop computers or laptops that need to be replaced. I'm not sure the age of these, but I'm guessing they're over 6 years old or something like that.
Yes.
So, I mean, you definitely want to consider taking the Azure cloud-based option. I was just curious with the cloud-based option, is that something that we should really fit into the budget somehow? So that, because that's going to be an ongoing cost anyway.
We can certainly do that. That's not an issue, just it was a suggestion. As I mentioned to you all before, I'm not fond of one-time money being spent for recurring costs. You could do the same thing with the $7,000 licenses per year for the cybersecurity, and then that would free up some additional money in ARPA to be allocated to something else. It does look like we will have a surplus in closing out FY 2023, so the money would be there to pay for that in the budget.
Is it 7,000 per year for licenses or 17? 17.
Yeah, but as an ongoing expense, we're going to bear
Yeah.
that.
Does say right up at the top, not an ongoing revenue source, staff would recommend the council allocate funds to one-time project expenditures that do not have a significant year-to-year upkeep on expenditures, as it would then need to be absorbed into the general operating budget of the city. I remember seeing that in the ARPA paperwork initially.
based on our discussion, I would move that we go ahead and replace the 6 computers at the approximate cost of $18,000 and integrate the other 2 items into the annual budget.
Which other 2 items?
would
18
be
grand.
Cybersecurity enhancements
Okay.
and the Azure cloud-based option.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
If we can discuss a little bit more, I'm thinking about the upfront cost. So both of those have an upfront cost as well as a per year. Am I reading into that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so would you be comfortable with us doing the upfront cost using the ARPA funds, but then the yearly funds could come from general budget?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That's amenable to me. I'm going to revise my motion. I move that we allocate $18,000 for technology upgrades to replace 6 computers. And in the case of the cybersecurity enhancements, the initial setup costs of $16,000. And in the case of the Azure cloud-based option, the initial setup of $13,700, with the remaining annual expenses going into the annual budget.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And if, while we're still on this topic, if we could go back to the slide that has the pyramid.
Jana can pull that up for you. I'd need to recalculate after this to make sure, and maybe Mr. Shoemaker has done that, can give us an idea about the 125, what's left.
It's about 77,000.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Could those funds be used to procure engineering services for our wastewater problem, for instance?
That is a possibility. Often when you issue bonds, you reimburse general fund for those costs out of the bonds, but that is something that has to do with service delivery for the city, so that might be an option. I'd need to double check that with our GrantWorks person.
So in looking at the pyramid, so yes, I kind of equate this to Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, right? We have to have the infrastructure. It's, we have to have water, we have to have wastewater. We also, the finances, that piece has to be going. And I feel like as a council, we've done a pretty good job of putting our focus on infrastructure and finances. But I don't want us to negate the community part. And I saw, in the community, in the previous slide, you had listed developing projects, future and existing, and then the comprehensive plan. But when I see community up there, I immediately think people. And this could be just a passion for me, but I would really like for us to do something for the people. Right? We're keeping the city running. Yes, we're doing something for people every time we come here in all of our decisions, especially when we're talking about wastewater and those kind of things. But I think putting a little bit of the funds that we have into the senior center, I would really like for us to consider that 30,000. So I would move that we allocate 30,000 of the ARPA funds to senior center upgrade.
A second.
Is that acceptable within the ARPA?
Yes, ma'am.
We still have about 35,000 left over after that.
Okay.
You still need a second for the motion that's on the floor.
I seconded.
You seconded
you.
it. That's 30K to the seniors, or the senior center. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Anything else?
So we still have a little bit left, so I'll rework this and bring it back at the next meeting, because you still have some more that we don't want to leave on the table, and we can decide where to put that then. Thank you.
Sorry. That 47,000 left over.
Okay, Wise County, number 4, Wise County Appraisal District nominations.
Thank you, Mayor. This was on the agenda the last time as well. You all still have in your packet the information that was included and the nominee that was from the city of Boyd. Rome, we have the option to nominate someone if we know of someone that we believe would be qualified or well suited for that board, but it's not a requirement of council. So I want to be sure that we're aware of that. The last time we discussed this, you wanted a little more time to put some thought into someone that you may want to nominate. So I'm bringing it back around. I think our deadline would be we'd have to have the nominee put forward at the next meeting.
And I noted that we had one person express interest.
That's the Boyd person
Uh-huh.
from their municipal development district. That is who Boyd has put forward as or nominated for the board, and they have circulated that around to some of the neighboring cities in case we were interested in voting for that person when the time came. Again, it's not required by council. It's just something that if you're interested, you can do. I don't know that we've ever nominated anyone for this board, so it's not something that you absolutely are required to handle.
Okay. Any action from council?
I move that we table this until the next meeting and all of us make a concerted effort to contact and network with others in the community to find someone who might be interested.
Do you have a second?
I believe we have to have someone submitted by October 14th. October 15th, excuse me.
Oh, thank you. I did not see that in the documentation.
Never mind.
I nominate Deborah B. Kraft since she's not here.
Very good. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
So are we gonna, do we need a motion to take that off the table then? Or
I remove my motion if it is disagreeable.
yeah. All right, let's move along. Number 5, additional water sources, grants, and financing options update. That would be between Councilmember Loftus.
I'm
and-
sorry, hold on one
Oops.
second.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Loftus, you think Ms. B. Kraft is actually interested? You've had a conversation with her about this?
No, I have not had a conversation. But she seems interested in.
She would be
what
able
goes
to
on.
do it, I'm sure.
The only reason why I abstained is because she's not here to speak for herself.
Well, we're running out of time. I have to have a motion put forward tonight, and I'm not certain if it even requires a resolution. So I would think so,
Yeah.
yes.
It does say each voting unit may nominate by resolution.
Okay, then we've missed that window. I thought we had until later in the month to submit it by the 31st.
Okay,
So it's a moot point at this juncture.
okay, all right. Ms. B. Kraft, next time.
Okay, so then now are we ready to move along? Okay, number 5, additional water sources, grants, financing options update. Councilmember Loftus and City Administrator.
So we do have a presentation pulled together. Mr. Loftus, if you'd like me to start it off, Mr. Dominguez and I talked to the Upper Trinity Ground Conservation District, which is different than the Upper Trinity Water District, and had a very informative discussion with them. They assist folks in the counties that you see listed here, Montague, Wise, Parker, and Hood counties with wells and drilling information, and they also work to protect the aquifer in our area and the recharge zones. We have a very large existing CCN, or Certificate of Convenience and Necessity, to provide water in our area, and this gives us the exclusive right to provide water in our CCN unless a dual option or dual application has been granted for that CCN. You all have at your table this map that I provided. This is one that I found when we were scanning some of our documents that I believe is close to representing our CCM, but I think we have relinquished some potentially, so we'll need to get this updated at some point. I know that, for instance, in the bottom half there along 287 where Reunion and Bluestem will be, that the developer for those two projects have applied for a dual CCN so they can provide water as well, but as of yet it hasn't been granted. So we will need to look at this as we go through, but you can see it's quite large. So we do have a right and or an obligation to provide water in that area. Our existing wells that we currently have drilled, as we've discussed with you before, are in the Paluxy Aquifer, which is part of the Trinity Aquifer grouping, which contains several that kind of moves down and through the Metroplex and down towards the Waco area when you look at that mapping. All of our wells, in talking to the Upper Trinity, are relatively shallow, which means they're not going to pull as many gallons of water per minute as what we currently need. We did talk to them about potentially drilling deeper at the existing sites that we have, which would benefit us if we're able to take advantage of the existing infrastructure. The question would be, if any of that infrastructure needs upgrading, whether that cost would be significant or not. And we won't know that till we get further along in engineering. However, if we re-drill these wells at each of those locations, we could potentially get 80 to 100 gallons per minute. And to give you some comparatives, our contract with Walnut Creek is 1,050 gallons a minute. That exists only through 2029. And I will tell you that there are other cities that are already looking to partner with Walnut Creek in 2029 for that 1,050 gallons. So we're going to need to continue to keep our lines of communication open with Walnut Creek, as well as explore opportunities on our own. As I mentioned to you before, I believe Rhome is currently approximately 95% dependent on Walnut Creek. That's an outside source that we don't really have any influence over other than as a customer. So it's very important that we look at this project and we see what's available to us. The current contract with Walnut Creek, even though it says 1,050 gallons, we're currently getting about 375, which is why we are at stage 3 water restrictions and have been since June 29th, I believe. So, Jesus, we have 3 or 4 wells that are functioning now. Okay, so we have 3 that are currently functioning. We have 1 that is going to be rehabbed through a CDBG grant, which is moving through its processes. And hopefully that one will be online sometime next year. But if we drill the other 3 and we say get 100 gallons a minute, then we could as easily have 400 gallons a minute from our own wells, which is considerably less expensive to produce than it is for us to purchase from Walnut Creek. If we had, for instance, that 400 gallons on tap today, we would not be in stage 3 water restrictions. So those are things that we need to consider as we are moving forward and as we are evaluating all of these options that exist for us. One of the things when we talked to the staff from Upper Trinity GCD, they mentioned that our engineer is able and willing to assist us with this process. We would have to submit an application to the UT GCD and an operating permit, and we need to speak with Kyle about the TCEQ process. They need to run simultaneously. The application and the request for the wells from the Upper Trinity GCD takes about 30 to 60 days for approval, but TCEQ is longer. And I don't know how long that is at this point. The other question that we asked them in our conversation is about how much they're seeing in a price per water well. And they said the average that they've been seeing to get anything that's any good draw is about $750,000 per well. We also need to do some maintenance on our ground storage water tanks. I mentioned that to you. So whatever we do at these well locations, we need to factor in that there are going to be upgrades and maintenance that need to be done on those tanks that has been neglected for several years. And we are going to have to factor into some of our conversations at some point that we're going to have to rehab our elevated tank. Believe it or not, it is old enough for that at this point. And so we're going to have to look at that in the coming budget years as well. Would you go to the next slide, please, ma'am? This is the one that Mr. Loftus and I sat in on, so I'm going to turn the mic over to him.
Well, yeah, we had a meeting with Joe Cohen and several of his folks from the Texas Water Development Board Region C, I believe it is. And yeah, it was rather eye-opening. They have several funding mechanisms. However, it is a very large bureaucracy. In my research of this, I have no less than 6 state boards, committees, and commissions that all work together to form the Texas Water Plan. And in order to receive any of these fundings, we have to have an engineered plan for what we're going to do. This is for wastewater also. I really focused on the wastewater side. And we also have to be on the Texas Water Plan. And they only meet at certain times of the year. I think there's a meeting on November 6th. I forwarded that to you, I believe. And I don't know if we're attending or not, or if we can even get on the agenda. But yeah, there are these funds up here that are mentioned. The one comment that Joe Cohen did make about the SWIFT loan was that he'd never seen any entity turned down for a SWIFT loan. So I was encouraged by that. Plus, you could do it over multiple years. So, and I think that's very well could be something we could benefit from, focusing on getting our wastewater treatment fixed, and then maybe, you know, a year for 3 subsequent years or something like that. At least that was my thinking. They also have some additional funds, for instance, the drinking water revolving fund, which they call the D fund, by the way. That it has a lead service line replacement fund within it, and so that's something we should consider taking advantage of. They also have in the TCEQ, something that's not mentioned up here, and I'm not sure where it fits in. They have a sanitary sewer overflow initiative going, and I believe since we have a documented problem with our wastewater plant, I would think easily qualify for something under that initiative. I just kind of stumbled over that today. So that's something where I believe we should be in contact with someone from that initiative, see how we get involved with it, because we definitely need it. So beyond that, I mean, we really need to start working on an RFP, if we haven't already, for engineering firms, and establish who we might want to use, hopefully get some references. I found an entire guide to your wastewater and water project here, which is, it's pretty overwhelming. So get the engineering plan going, get on the Texas Water Plan, and maybe find what other resources we can use. I know I ran into an old acquaintance I hadn't seen in 30 years this summer, and he's a civil engineer. And I think if we even had a third party to assist us with managing our engineering firms, that might be helpful. Just a thought. But that's all I had to add. Now, in our meeting with the Water Development Board, they mentioned a Greater Texoma Utility Authority. Have you been in contact with them?
Looked into that. I'm not sure that we're going to be a good fit for that, but I did look into it.
But over the past few days, I've learned more about this than I really wanted to. It's above my pay grade.
So if I could provide a little more detail, you have at your table, I printed off all of the summary of the 3 the three funds that we show up here, one of them did not have a summary, so let me just go through this quickly. The DWSRF loan, the one that is geared towards drinking water, that is the most competitive fund for people to receive funding through from TWDB. Yeah, one of the things that they did say is the reason this is so popular is for cities or communities that are disadvantaged or small and rural and disadvantaged or have a very small system or are putting forward a green project or have an urgent need project, you have the possibility of having some of the principal of the loan forgiven. That is why this is so interesting to people to apply for. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had something to add in. So the interesting thing about this, though, is it is a 12 to 18-month process for the first go-round to even find out if you're selected. If you're not selected, you can resubmit all the same documents the following year, just change the dates. But the selection is subject to fund availability. So if multiple cities are funded before we are, then we would not receive, et cetera, et cetera. You can see from the sheet at your table that they fund water infrastructure, water treatment facilities, distribution centers, and a host of other things under this particular process. When Mr. Loftus says it is overwhelming, I would 100% agree with him because they walked us through their website and there are so many different avenues. For instance, there are some advertising requirements as it relates to the American iron workers. There is just all kinds of other things that you have to do as part of this, which doesn't make it a bad process. It just makes it a very laborious process. One of the other things to be mindful of is if we are drilling wells, in the notes that I had, it requires their full review process, which is environmental, historical, local floodplain control, coordination with the Texas Parks and Wildlife, etc. And we heard on Saturday at a regional meeting that the city of Boyd, when they went through their process, had to submit their loan application to 32 different Indian tribes for it to be reviewed before it could go through the entirety of the process. And I think he said it took them 2 to 3 years to get through that, if I recall. So if council decides to go with this fund before we do anything, it's going to be a while. And we're going to be very, very close up against that 2029 deadline of having no water from Walnut Creek potentially, unless they would like to extend the contract to us. And I don't know what the opportunity is for that. The D fund that Mr. Loftus referenced is the quickest way to obtain funding through them. You can also use that for water and wastewater. Basically what that means is that the city would sign a financial agreement with the state and we get to use the state's buying power. So we would go from an A+ bond rating on the issuance, we would go up to a AAA bond rating. So the interest rate would be just slightly lower than what we could gain on our own. So that's something to consider as we go through this capital improvement conversation. That's also dependent on funding, so we have to apply fairly quickly in early spring in order for them to consider it sometime in the May through August timeline of 2024. They will not, so for instance, however many cities submit a financial application, if it's for 750 million, that's what they go get the bond for. Not for us, mind you, but for all the cities in one pool. And then they go and they get a bond and they distribute the funds, and it could be up to several hundred cities that they're distributing the funds to. So I don't want to scare anyone, but that's how that D fund works, which is why it is popular with people, because especially in a smaller city, Rhome's very fortunate to have an A+ bond rating. That's difficult in some of your outer lying areas where revenues are very hard to come by. And so going under that D fund, you immediately elevate your buying status and your interest rate. The CWSRF is the same thing as the DWSRF. It is just aimed at funding wastewater projects and has all the same overwhelming hoops that need to be jumped through. We would definitely have to rely on somebody to help us get through that process and to get on the state's water plan in order to be even considered for these. We looked at that online, and there are several cities that have already been in process for a year or two to get the state's water plan amended so that they can move forward with this type of funding. That also falls in line with the SWIFT loan for the wells. During the call, or actually at the TML conference, it was kind of comical because I went to a couple of public works classes, and one of the someone came up to the mic and said, I don't know why they call them swift, because they're anything but. And that is a true statement. It takes a bit of time to get that done. So these are some of the funding options that exist in addition to going out for bonds. One of the other things we asked the folks is if we issued, say, if we put before the voters in May a bond and it passed, then could we convert it to something like this later? And he said, you can try, but in his 15 years of working for TWDB, he's only seen 2 cities be successful in that conversion. So I would not say the odds are in our favor for that type of a plan. But that's just some of the information that we've garnered from our last meeting to this to try and inform council so that we know which direction to go. I cannot stress enough that our water issue is an issue. When our contract runs out in 2029, there are other cities, as I mentioned, lined up at Walnut Creek wanting that capacity. I don't know if we will get any type of an extension. And I can promise you the 3 wells we have now won't even, you won't be able to turn on your tap or flush your toilet or take a shower. There's just not going to be enough water. So one of the other things that I've had a chance to sit on in several times is there was a WISE regional water meeting on Saturday at the city of Aurora. We discussed the need to form a regional coalition, which would be very similar to the Upper Trinity Ground Conservation District. The cities that might be in this southern part of Wise County that could be part of this coalition would be Aurora, Newark, Rhome, New Fairview, Boyd, and potentially Paradise. The general takeaways from that meeting on Saturday was that the only long-term solution for Wise County is going to be surface water. And by surface water, I mean you're not drilling into the ground to get it. We do not have access to the water in Lake Bridgeport or Eagle Mountain Lake that is spoken for by other cities. The city of Fort Worth, I believe Decatur and Bridgeport get some of their water from Lake Bridgeport. The Upper Trinity Regional Water District, which we didn't discuss tonight, it's not the ground conservation, I'm sorry, I misspoke. They had a representative there that was from Dr. Stuckey's office, and he talked about how the 23 cities went in to form that group in 1989. So we're a little behind the curve, but this is something that could potentially be looked at in tandem with some of the other projects that we would want to consider. We did discuss whether or not we could just join Upper Trinity, and that's not an option for us. It requires legislative authority, so what we would have to do is come together over the next several months to draft legislation to start this process moving. Dr. Stuckey, both the representative from Senator Tam Parker's office and from Congressman Burgess's offices were there. They all 3 expressed interest in supporting that legislation to help move this forward for the southern part of the county. So that is something that would be of benefit to us to look at as well, because what we talked about at the regional water meeting is not water. We've got 2 issues. We have water in the short term and we have water 50 years from now. And it takes about 25 to 50 years to get groundwater dammed or built in the form of a lake in order for that to start filling. So this is really forward looking from the standpoint of all of Wise County to some extent. Judge Clark, as you may know, has scheduled a county-wide water meeting on the 15th of November. We will have staff representatives present for that discussion. I believe it's open to council. If any of you did not receive an invitation, I'm happy to send that to you. Historical note from one of the folks that attended that meeting on Saturday is the last time that Wise County was in a very, very significant drought was the 1950s through 1957, when that drought stretched from Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas, and the only thing that ended it was 24 inches of rain that fell in one weekend and washed out 25 bridges in Wise County and upended houses, and people had to move, etc. That was a pretty dramatic story to be told. So there's lots of history in our area as it relates to water. We've taken copious notes at some of the meetings, and I've translated those into what I've explained to you this evening. So it is something that is going to be on your agenda several times until we can get some sort of relief, because that is of service to the community. And one of the most basic services of a city is to provide for public health, safety, and welfare, and water's critical.
Okay, so I hear you saying it's going to take time, right? And all of the processes, all of the options take a lot of time. What can we do now to get us moving in that direction?
So that's the great question. We, to just be frank, we've got to look at some bonds in May for water and or wastewater or a combination therein. We had a conversation today with our engineer to Mr. Loftus's question. We use Kimley Horn and he's well versed in our system. They have a fairly deep bench to pull from. We had an opportunity to talk to someone in their wastewater division today about what Mr. Dominguez is seeing at the West plant. And, you know, we've always operated under the assumption that that plant was at a 0.15 MGD a day, and we're not sure it was built to that because it is not performing as it should. And I'm not going to get into all the details of the drying beds and all of the other things because it's complex. But Mr. Dominguez spends a lot of time at that plant making sure that it's running. As a matter of fact, I believe, was it Friday or Saturday evening, sir? So he was there from about 9 o'clock to 3 a.m. because we had pumps go out at the plant, and he had to make sure that they were functioning and that it didn't overflow. So we are spending an inordinate amount of time making sure that that continues to work, but it does handle a considerable amount of wastewater for that side of the city, and it is well over capacity for the number of homes that it was meant to serve. So we have to figure out why the effluent and the product is not working as it should. So they're looking into that to see if there's some short-term items that we can fix to help with that, because the East plant's functioning very well. Thereafter, though, if this community opts not to fund bonds, we had a petition submitted this evening about the tax rate when we kept it the same as last year, and all of that money was meant to go to infrastructure. So if that's successful, then any of the projects you were going to talk about that would be funded through that are not going to be able to be done. But I will tell you, on your current tax rate at the voter approval rate, we don't have any capacity from which to fund that. So it's got to come from either debt, or we're going to have to wait it out and hope that we get a loan or a grant. And it could be right up until the time that we lose our contract with Walnut Creek. I have mentioned this to you before. I think it's probably been discussed by other folks in my chair, but this is a critical issue. And if we put it on the ballot in May and it's voted down again, I really don't know what we do from there.
Right. We definitely have our work cut out for us to tell the story,
Mm-hmm.
right, and to help voters understand. But my question is, what can we do right now? Do we need to look at an engineer firm like Mr. Loftus was suggesting? What can we do?
So we have our engineers working on this already. They are updating all of the information for the wastewater treatment plant that was brought as long ago as, I believe, July of 22. A conversation was had about the West plant. There was some sort of a revenue increase that was supposed to go towards that minimum requirement at that plant. There's disagreement on how much was authorized, so we're still doing some research on that. And once we get those prices, that's what the capital improvement regular meeting, where that's all we discuss, would be part of this issue. There's some heavy lifting between now and January in order to get a plan forward, because in January we have certain notifications if we are going to go for a bond, and then we have to start that education process as to where we're at. We need to keep rehabbing the well that we have that's downtown. Is that well 6, Mr. Dominguez? We need to keep that for the CDBG grant going through, because I believe that produced roughly 100 gallons a minute whenever it was operational, so we need to get that finished. But these are the steps. They are in motion. We have an engineering firm, and they are running those numbers for us. We've also reached out to the gentleman who installed the 1998 plant, the plant in 1999, the West plant. Mr. Dominguez had a chance to speak to him, and they've put together some numbers as well that may be an option for us. The other issue is, if the West plant was not built to the 0.15 MGD, then we need to upsize it to that. If it was, and we're going to seek a permit to increase that, it can be as many as 2 years before TCEQ will approve that increase. So we have to start that process very quickly. So I sent them all the plans that we found about the West plant. When we went through all of our records retention and management work, we found all of the original plans from 1998, scanned those in, and we sent those off to them today. And they said, how come we didn't have these before today? And I said, well, probably because they were in a drawer in paper form and they weren't located. I said, but now that it's in the electronic system, we have quite a bit more access to it. So they were very thrilled to get it, and I'm hopeful to hear something next week from them.
Okay, on the Public Utility Commission of Texas's website, they offer free help. So I don't know if that's worth looking into or not. And then also be very interested in this TCEQ program, their sanitary sewer overflow initiative. It would seem like they might fast track something that has a documented issue.
So I can look into that next week and provide some information on the 26th as to what may or may not be an option through there. I may need to call some folks just to get some more details, but we should certainly consider having your engineer back out at some of these meetings to present to you all as well. And he definitely should be there at the capital improvement plan meeting so that he can explain to you some of the steps behind it. But we're at a critical point now, and we've got to keep the flywheel moving, if you will, so that we can make some progress.
Let's say on the funds, do you need direction on which one specifically to go for? Or?
My hope is that when we get a date for this longer meeting specifically on this topic, that I will have enough details that you all can make an informed decision. Right now, this is just kind of a general overview of the work we've done to date, and I would like to have some hard numbers for you to consider, as well as what these programs will and won't do. We've not missed any deadlines for the next year for these programs, but we do have to move along pretty quickly if we're going to apply.
And what was it that there was an application or some process that was 30 to 60 days with drilling?
So that is through the Upper Trinity Ground Conservation District, and they've been very good about sending us all the information and have stated that they would be glad to help us with that. I don't know if we need to start that till we have a firm plan as to whether we're going to do water and wastewater together or one or the other. I don't want to get the application in and then have it sit there or get approved and it expires. I'm not real sure if that's something that goes along those lines. So these are all discussions with the engineer and with Mr. Dominguez that we'll need to start next week. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move on. The city administrator asked that we move the item from the executive session, the truck purchase contracts for public works, to move that up on the regular agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. When I put this on the agenda, I wasn't sure if we needed to consult with Mr. Adkins on this or not because it involves a contract. However, this is really more about the pricing than the contract itself. So in talking with him, he advised that we could just move this into regular session to make it easier for everyone. I don't know how many of you recall, but a couple of years ago, well, almost a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, in March of 2022, we placed an order for 3 trucks for Public Works because the trucks we currently have well exceeded their lifespan as well. We received funding through that from GovCap. We obtained a loan for, I believe, a total of $135,000 roughly for the trucks and $112,000 for the backhoe that we bought that was new, that was needed by Public Works. The issue that we've run into is that we went through buy board, which is available to all cities and others, that it's kind of a collective bargaining type thing. So you don't have to necessarily go out for several different bids. You can go through buy board if they're registered. And we did go through with a dealer from buy board down in Austin. They received the order. They never filled the order. And during the transition, when the city administrator and the previous public works director left, this became an ancillary conversation because we couldn't quite get an answer from them. So Ms. Odom did a great job, and Mr. Dominguez, of pushing on these folks to find out where they were and what had happened. And she finally was able to get an email from them that it was never I don't remember the correct terminology, but basically they didn't ever fulfill the order. So we would have still been sitting here waiting for these trucks, and we're almost into 2024. We currently have one truck that I talked to Mr. Dominguez, and one of our staff members was driving it this week, and the truck just stops in the middle of the road. And you can't steer it and you can't brake it, and you just kind of hope it glides over to the side. We have a couple of others that are also in similar condition, not quite as bad as that, but the vendor that we went through failed to keep us informed. So we have been pricing these. We were able to talk to Mr. Adkins and the vendor, and we were able to cancel the order about 2 months ago, just to get out from underneath that contract so that we could start to look at it from different vendors. We have priced that, and of course, as you well imagine, the prices have gone up since we priced them in 2022. So I would need authority from council and direction on which way they want to go. We do have the $135,000 from GovCap has been in our account. We have already made one payment on these loans, so we're not in any jeopardy along that line. But the total cost of the trucks have gone up between $30,000 and $60,000 for all three, not a piece. So if we decide to go, and one of the things in talking to Mr. Dominguez, and I do agree with him on this, that when you're purchasing trucks for this type of use, a diesel engine is far better than a gas. However, the order was placed for gas. These trucks idle a lot as they are in and out at a variety of stops. So since we canceled the order with the other vendor, I'd need to know if council wants us to purchase gas engines or diesel engines. And it's approximately $8,500 per truck for gas in an increase, and it's approximately another $9,000 roughly for diesel. And it takes roughly the same ordering time. We do have a lead on a couple that may be on some local lots, but they're not members of buy board. So I just need some direction and some spending authority as to what you want to do with this.
I mean, diesel, you're going to run into a lot less maintenance, I think, especially with them idling.
I would agree with that, Mr. Shoemaker, and we also keep our trucks for a long time. And we, as long as we take care of them, then those diesel engines will last us many years.
Yeah, 'cause they don't break-in mileage is 100,000.
I know TxDOT still has their 05s and their gas. It's the 5.3 liter, and they do a lot of idle. I used to work for them, so they have more hours than miles on them. But a diesel's a better way to go. I'm just looking at the finance part of it.
So with the current loan, we would continue that, and we would make a budget amendment in this fiscal year to take that money out of general fund. As I mentioned to you all before, we are going to have excess in 2023, as well as we've projected excess in the coming fiscal year. So it's just really, what does council prefer, and which direction do they want to give staff, so that we can bring that amendment to the budget forward for you, and we can have some direction on ordering and securing these.
So there is wiggle room in the current fiscal year budget.
There
For
will
that.
be, once we close out 2023, yes, there will be room for that in the general fund, yes.
I think I can go for diesel then.
Well, you said the gas was 8,500 and diesel was 9,000.
An additional 9,000. So, right, you'd need to add the 8,500 and the 9,000 together.
Whoa.
So 17,500
Per truck?
per truck.
Are you looking at Ford, Chevy, or Dodge?
Yes. We have looked at both Ford and Chevrolet. We have not looked at Dodge. The original specs were for F-250s, XL four-wheel drive super cab with a 6.2 liter V8 four-wheel drive engine, or excuse me, engine with the four-wheel drive capability, because they are often off-road in a variety of spots, and so that is helpful. So it's really just at council's pleasure which way we go on this.
I think you have to do it. And the longer you wait with the UAW strikes and all of that going on, the more expensive that automobiles are going to be. So I move that we go ahead and do whatever we need to do the diesel engines. Do you already have what you need for the backhoe?
Yes,
Did
ma'am.
that came
We
in?
purchased that, and it is on site, yes.
I'd really like to see you go with the Dodge. The Cummins is a lot better engine than the other
Dodge is probably
two.
gonna be cheaper than the other two.
Yeah, but that Cummins is what I'm looking at.
We're happy to look that direction if that's council's feedback to staff.
Look at all of them, but I mean, just don't roll them out.
Have a Dodge, so I understand.
Chevys use the same diesel engine for the past 20 years. Pretty stable.
Chevy's got the best transmission.
I'll second the motion.
All right. So King made the motion. Shoemake, second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
good. All right, let's go to executive session. The one item we've already discussed out of executive session. Section 551.087, deliberations regarding economic development negotiations to discuss or deliberate regarding commercial or financial information that the city has received from a business prospect that the city seeks to locate, stay, or expand in or near the city, and with which the city is conducting economic development negotiations. Hickory Creek Development Project. It is 7:20. We will convene into executive session.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. It is 7:51. We'll reconvene into regular session. There's not going to be any action taken as a result of, gosh, we were back there a long time. As a result of executive session. Do I have any future agenda items? Okay. And so I need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to
I'll second.
adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. 7:52, we're out of here. Thank you.